On January 28th of 2019, some of the biggest news of the 2018-2019 NBA season began to circulate within the media. News that would affect the New Orleans Pelicans for both the rest of the season and the foreseeable future. The news being that the superstar player Anthony Davis not only informed the team that he would not be signing a contract extension, but also that at that very moment he was requesting a trade away from the team. A trade request that came only a day after Davis being ruled out for up to 2 weeks with an index finger sprain. But this wasn't just an ordinary trade request for a number of reasons. For starters, this was a pretty big deal for both the league and the Pelicans, considering it was a superstar like AD who was making the request. The second reason being that it was sort of out of nowhere, and that's not to say that there wasn't rumors about the possibility due to the Pelicans' continuous failed attempts at success, and many people talking about how Anthony Davis' prime was being wasted in New Orleans. However, even with that being the case, it was still kind of unexpected considering it was in the middle of the season. And AD had been playing well in most of the recent games, along with the fact that AD would have been able to sign the Supermax if he had stayed with the Pelicans for the next few years of his career. However, the oddest part of the trade request was the fact that Anthony Davis chose to make it publicly, which also happens to be against NBA rules, and ended up with him being fined $50,000. But even with all the drama now surrounding Davis in the trade request, the Pelicans made it pretty clear that they wouldn't be trading Davis. The team were even willing to have Davis not playing games until the trade deadline in order to not trade him. And even when Davis did return from injury, the Pelicans still only played him in selective games in order not to be fined for the league for sitting him out. But through all of that, the fact remains that AD did finish out the season on the New Orleans Pelicans. And now that we've outlined the background of Anthony Davis and his exit from the Pelicans, let's get into the post-AD era for the team, where the future of the team really started to be built. This obviously started with the exit of AD, which took place on June 15th when the blockbuster trade sending AD to the Lakers and LeBron took place. In return for Anthony Davis, the Los Angeles Lakers sent back Lonzo Ball, Brandon Ingram, Josh Hart, and 3 first-round picks, which included the 4th overall pick in the 2019 NBA Draft. And it was at that very moment where not only was the new top team in the NBA formed with the LA Lakers, who now had AD and LeBron, but it was also the moment where the New Orleans Pelicans were forced to rebuild their team with many new players and a new direction as a team as a whole. And by looking at the title of the video, I know most of you are thinking that this is another one of those crazy NBA takes. However, I actually don't think that this one is too far-fetched, as although AD was essentially that whole Pelicans team, with the new players and playstyle, I think the Pelicans have some real potential to be a playoff team in the next couple of years, and maybe even compete for the championship when their young core develop and continue to build team chemistry, especially considering they already have a 28-36 record, which although isn't great, is already better than the 22-28 record they had at the time of Anthony Davis requesting a trade last season. But now that we've talked enough about AD, let's not talk about the current team and potentially the best young core in the NBA, or at least one of the best young trios in Zion Willamson, Brandon Ingram, and Lonzo Ball. And when talking about this new roster, the first player and probably most influential is obviously Zion Williamson. Zion being the first overall pick in the 2019 NBA Draft, who has been regarded as one of the biggest future NBA stars in recent league history. So with Zion having all this hype around him and him supposedly being a generational talent, it was basically a no-brainer that the Pelicans would be taking him with the first overall pick. And to give a little background about Zion, he attended Duke University where he averaged 23 points, 9 rebounds, 2 blocks, and 2 steals in his freshman year, which also ended up winning him Consensus National Player of the Year. And with these stats, you can also see why he was viewed so highly. And not only why he's the most important player of the Pelicans roster, but also why many see him as a perfect replacement for AD. And if his college stats were enough for you to believe that he has the potential to be an NBA star, his player profile comparisons also share the same story, as Zion is often looked at for his weight being around 280 pounds, which is considerably heavy for a basketball player. But what's shocking is the athleticism he's able to maintain while weighing so much, as his combination of speed and leaping ability makes him a clear freak of nature, and in the words of Kevin Durant, a once-in-a-generation type athlete. But that's not where the physical dominance stops for Zion, as he's also able to adapt with both his left and right hand, which makes him even more versatile compared to most players. And lastly, what's most impressive about his build is that because he's only 6'6" and not really tall enough to play center, Zion is a mismatch for almost anyone guarding him at the forward positions. But even with all that being said, none of this actually proves that he will be able to produce in the NBA, and will live up to all the expectations put on him. So to look at that, let's now look at his career since he has been in the NBA. And first off, let me be the first to say that I was one of the people who doubted if Zion's pure athleticism would completely translate to the NBA game. But after watching the small sample size he has had in the league, I will say that my opinion is slowly changing. But anyways, the career of Zion didn't exactly start off as he had hoped, as on October 13, 2019, during the preseason game, Zion ended up tearing his meniscus, which meant that he would be out of action for at least 3 months, and also meant that his NBA debut would have to wait. And it wasn't until January 22nd, 2020, where Zion officially made his debut for the Pelicans, where he scored 22 points with 7 rebounds, and a game where he scored 17 points in the span of only 3 minutes. And after that, Zion continued to display why he was the first overall pick, as he became the first teenager in NBA history to score 20 points or more in 10 consecutive games. On top of that, Zion was also able to put up a career-high 35 points in a game against the league-leading LA Lakers. And trust me, I know that Zion has only actually played 3 months in the NBA. However, I think it's still clear how important he is for the future of the Pelicans, as they hope to be a better team than they were with AD. And with that, it's also clear now that Zion does have the potential to be the leader of this team for years to come, as he's already averaging the most points in the team at 23.6 points per game. But the points are not the only thing. He's already proving doubters wrong, as he's also willing to shoot the 3-ball, which is not something that many expected when he transitioned to the NBA game. And although he hasn't been particularly groundbreaking on the defensive side of the ball, he has picked up where he left off on the athleticism front, and is also proving that beside the meniscus injury, his weight shouldn't be an issue for the longevity of his career. Like I mentioned previously, Zion isn't the only reason the Pelicans are looking positive post-AD. The team's young trio also includes Lonzo Ball and Brandon Ingram, both of which were number 2 overall picks in their respective drafts, and both of which came over from the Lakers in the trade involving AD. And when talking about these two players, I think it's fair to start off with Brandon Ingram, since he has been the most influential member of the trade for the Pelicans thus far. Brandon Ingram being a player who had pretty high expectations coming into the league for the Lakers, and was put into a position to be the future leader of that team. However, after a poor rookie season where he only averaged 9 points on 40% shooting, many began to doubt his play. And although his next 2 seasons did look drastically better, with him averaging 16 to 18 points per game, there were still questions around what the true potential of Brandon Ingram would be, which is also why many thought that the trade would allow him to have a fresh start in a more low-key playing destination. And let me tell you, this season with the Pelicans, Ingram has definitely put the league on notice, and has demonstrated what his potential truly is. And this newfound play from Ingram was also no small jump, as he was now playing to career highs in almost every category, in a season where he was averaging 24.3 points, 6 rebounds, and 4 assists per game, while also shooting 47% from the field, with a 53% effective field goal percentage. These numbers also allowed him to be named to his first ever All-Star game while playing in the tough Western Conference. And although the Pelicans still don't have a winning record, I think it's pretty clear that they wouldn't even have a lot of these wins if it wasn't for Ingram leading them on the offensive side of the ball. I also think that through his newfound play, it also serves the purpose of the video on why the Pelicans might actually improve even with the loss of AD. Because if players like Ingram and Zion can continue to play like this and develop, the potential is almost limitless for the New Orleans Pelicans. And now, the last player I want to focus on, the always controversial Lonzo Ball. And because most of you probably know the background of Lonzo Ball and the dramas surrounding his personal life and NBA career, we're just going to skip past that part for now. But to start, Lonzo Ball, like Ingram, was also drafted by the LA Lakers, and also had very high expectations on him since his time back in college, as when he was drafted to LA, people were expecting him to be the point guard of the future for them, with his stellar passing abilities and his developing jump shot. However, like Ingram, things didn't start as expected for Lonzo in LA, as although his rebounds and assist numbers didn't look bad and were definitely better than average, where the problems really lied for Lonzo was with his shooting. And it's not like anyone expected him to be some amazing shooter, especially not in the NBA, because that was never really his game. However, I think most of us would agree that shooting 36% from the field and 30% from 3 are unacceptable numbers, especially for a player many considered the best coming out of the draft. But along with his poor shooting numbers, when LeBron arrived in LA to basically run the point guard, it quickly became clear that Lonzo's role with the team was now in question. And just like Ingram, him being traded to the Pelicans marked a new start for him in his career. Now, in his 3rd year of his NBA career and on a new team, Lonzo Ball has finally shaped many of the distractions and toxicity that was holding him back. And although many people began to argue that Lonzo Ball was overrated after his first few years in the NBA, now on the Pelicans, I'm here to argue that he might actually be underrated. And that's because Lonzo is actually now the starting point guard for the New Orleans Pelicans. And not only that, but he's actually doing a good job of facilitating the offense where he's averaging 7 assists per game, which is up from what he had in his last year in LA. But not only that, the biggest flaw of his game, which was his shooting, is also continuously improving. And although it's clear that he'll never be a lights-out shooter, Lonzo is definitely learning where his shot is and when he should take it, which is clear by looking at his effective field goal percentage, which is 52% and a pretty solid number, especially when comparing it to his rookie year when it was 44%. However, where Lonzo has really shined for the Pelicans is on the defensive side of the ball, as he has grown into being one of their defensive centerpieces. Whereas most other point guards lack on the defensive side of the ball, Lonzo's actually made that the shining part of his game. And even when looking at the stats, he's actually the most influential defensive player on the team, which probably has something to do with him averaging almost 2 steals per game and also having 5 defensive rebounds per game, which is quite high for a point guard. But I say all this about Lonzo and his development to wrap up the topic about the young trio in New Orleans, and to explain how Lonzo being a hard-working defensive-minded point guard who doesn't need to be the first scoring option actually helps complement the playing styles of Zion and Ingram. Moving on, although we're done with the young trio, there are still a few other young players on the Pelicans that are important to their current and future developments. Two of those key players being Jackson Hayes and Nickeil Alexander-Walker, both of which were selected later in the first round after the Zion pick in 2019. And although neither of them get as much hype or attention as Zion, both of them are still key parts of the team's future post-AD. For Jackson Hayes, he's likely to be the center of the future for the team. And for Alexander Walker, depending on his development, he could either be a starting guard for them or a solid bench player. Either way, they will likely both be there long term. And although Hayes and Walker are only averaging 8 and 5 points respectively, it's important to note that neither of them are playing any sort of crazy minutes, and are only really playing on the second unit. But even with that, you can still see flashes of potential from both of them. For Jackson Hayes, it comes with his rim protecting abilities and his effective shot selection in the paint. And for Walker, it comes with his developing three-pointer shot, and his desire to score the ball. So although right now, it might not seem like these players are key pieces for the team, if the team does want to exceed the success they had with Anthony Davis, these players will be crucial in helping them do so. But now that we're done talking about the younger players on the team, let's now talk about a veteran of the team that is serving as not only the cornerstone for the team itself, but also for the development of the younger players. And that player obviously being Jrue Holiday, who was the former starting point guard and now shooting guard for the team. And now 29 years old, Jrue actually arrived to New Orleans back in 2013, when he was traded to the team. And since then, he has been one of the only constants on the team, a player who has been consistent over the years and even a one-time All-Star. And with all these new players, it has basically been his job to drive both the on-court and off-court development of them, while also trying to be a contributing member of the team himself. And although many just see him as a glue guy on the team with no crucial role, what Jrue has managed to do for the team on the court this season has been key. As even with all these new players demanding the ball, Jrue still managed to average 19.6 points per game, which is actually the second most he's averaged in his career. Not only that, Jrue has also still managed to get his fellow players involved, as he also dishes out 7 assists per game, while doing it from the shooting guard position. And just by those numbers, I think it's pretty clear that he's a really large part of the team's offense. But even with that being said, where Jrue has really excelled is on the defensive end, where he's actually made NBA defensive teams in the last 2 seasons. Jrue being one of the best defending guards in the NBA and definitely one of the best defenders on the Pelicans team, if not the best, while he averages 1.7 steals per game, which puts him top 10 in the NBA. And even without looking at the stats, just by watching him play, you can see how witty and swift he is on the defensive end, while giving opposing guards continuous trouble. But that being said, through the analysis of both his offensive and defensive play, I think many will realize why Jrue Holiday is actually irreplaceable and why he's so crucial in holding the team together post-AD. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is the overall team play and the playstyle the Pelicans run. Starting with their offense, the team's head coach Alvin Gentry is known for running the 7 seconds or less offense, which basically encourages the team to speed up the play and run the break on transitions. And this sort of playstyle is even shown through the stats, as the Pelicans average the second fastest pace in the NBA. However, although this style of offense can be risky at times, it seems like for the Pelicans it has been working for the most part. As usual with this style, it is expected that shooting percentages and numbers will be down due to the players being rushed to shoot. However, this style actually had the opposite effect for the Pelicans, as this season, the Pelicans actually had the 5th best 3-point shooting percentage, along with 4th most field goals made. And although these stats are not everything, considering the Pelicans have a negative record, it does give some insight into the developing offensive scheme the Pelicans are trying to build. On the defensive side of the ball, the outlook is a little less positive, as they are at the bottom half of the league in most defensive stats. And this is largely due to the fact that the majority of the team's defense is left in the hands of the guards Jrue Holiday and Lonzo Ball. So although they are clamping down defensively, as a team, the defense still has a long ways to go. But even with that being the case, as I mentioned throughout the video, the team has multiple above average defensive players, such as Jrue, Lonzo, Jackson Hayes, Brandon Ingram, and maybe even Zion. So even though they might not put it all together as a team yet, they will still promise for the defensive ability of this team. But to now conclude, through this video, I think we now have a better understanding of the vision for the New Orleans Pelicans now that AD has left the team. As even without AD, the Pelicans have a solid group of both veterans and young players who can all contribute to the team's development and potential success. And although they might not see immediate success, the team has continued to put themselves in a position to hopefully be a playoff and championship contenders sometime in the near future. So even with no AD and some uncertainties about who will lead the team, I think the Pelicans are in a positive position with Zion and the rest of the guys. But anyways, with that being said, please like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. And let me know down below what your opinions on the Pelicans team are and the AD situation. And if there are any other NBA related topics you want me to cover. But it's been BTG, and I'll see you next time when we talk all about the game.